What is up, Bills Mafia? It's Sunday, and we don't have a Buffalo Bills football game to talk about today, but we are previewing tomorrow's Monday night-ish contest between the Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. I am your host of the Shout Buffalo Bills football podcast, Matt Parrino. He is my tag team partner, my co-host, Ryan Talbot. We got a lot to dive into, but Ryan, but it's a little weird. How many Sundays has it been now without two in a row without the Bills on Sunday, and also the third week in a row where we haven't had a 1 o'clock game? It just feels weird right now.
Oh, it's so bizarre. I'm a creature of habit. I love the 1 p.m. games. I love being able to get everything done, still be able to watch that Sunday night game and enjoy that. You know, with these Monday evening games coming up here at 5 p.m. tomorrow, it's just such a bizarre feeling. It's just like, you know, what do I do with my Sunday other than watch other games, which is definitely the game plan. But yeah, very bizarre. You get used to watching those 1 p.m. kickoffs. So they'll be back again soon enough.
One cool thing about these Sundays without the Bills is I get to kind of go back to being a fan and just watch Red Zone and follow my fantasy teams, because game days, I mean, you know, I tell people all the time, it's like you can't be a football fan anymore, really, the way you used to, because you don't watch the games the same way when the Bills are on. You can't really watch other games, especially like in the press box. And then after the game, you're just furiously working and you kind of miss the 4 o'clock games. And so you only get to really watch the primetime games. So it's fun to get back to that this week. This is the Shout Buffalo Bills football podcast, brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets, your neighborhood stores with more. Shout out to our sponsor. We got a lot to talk about. We're coming off of, obviously a very disappointing game for Bills fans, because I think this was the first real litmus test. I don't want to diminish the start of the season and the 4-0 start. They played some good teams. I think that Rams team could be a Super Bowl contender, but this was like, it just felt different. It was on prime time. It was against the Titans, who went to the AFC title game last year. And, you know, you went out there and you laid an egg. No matter what the circumstances were, this was a game that you probably wanted to perform a little bit better in. And so that's our top storyline here going into this game. Why don't you take it? Because you sent it over to me this morning.
Yeah, you know, I'm a glutton for punishment, so I went and I rewatched that game 2 times, actually. And my observation after rewatching it twice is it wasn't as bad as the final score indicates. Now, yeah, they were thumped. It was 42-16 at the end of the day. Anyone that didn't watch that would say it was a beatdown, and in many ways it was. But they were mistakes that are fixable. Buffalo turned the ball over too many times. They gave the Titans outstanding field position, 4 drives, starting within Buffalo's 30-yard line. That is a recipe for disaster. So you cut down on the turnovers. You make sure that you're not giving such great field position away to opposing teams, and you eliminate some of those pre-snap penalties. Those were brutal, but fixable. And at the end of the day, those are all things where, hey, it wasn't Josh Allen was running for his life and throwing the ball into the ground. He had a lot of great passes in that game. It wasn't anything necessarily with the run defense. I thought they had another really good game against Derrick Henry. It's little things that are fixable, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Now, defense, that's a whole nother matter, but there's going to be some missing pieces that we may see back here on Monday evening.
Yeah, for everybody that's watching live, we always appreciate you. Throw your questions in the that you have. We'll hit them at the end, because this is kind of going to be a dual threat podcast. We're gonna preview this game and then take any questions that you guys have about the Bills and about the season and where we're sitting here ahead of this game. But I think, to your point, you know, I don't want to minimize the circumstances of last week too much, because I think that they played a big role in why the Bills struggled so much in that game. Listen, first and foremost, you're without Tre'davious White, Matt Milano, John Brown, huge pieces. And I know one of the things that we're going to talk about today is Tremaine Edmonds, I would imagine. You know, I sent out a tweet and a story this week about how he's been struggling, and Lorenzo Alexander, you know, came to his former teammates' defense and said, listen, I don't think he's struggling as much as you'd think. Obviously, he's fighting through the injury. But no matter how you want to slice it, that Bills team that showed up to Tennessee with everything that was going on around that week, having the game pushed back a couple of days. Like, I remember, you know, just being around the facility the week of the game, and the uncertainty around the game, I feel like, really impacted, you know, the preparation process when you have to cancel a practice. And so I think that there were so many other things going on in that game that I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt when it comes to Let's see what this team looks like, and a little bit more closer to full strength on Monday against the Chiefs. And I think that we'll see a much different team. Now, you start getting into the nuts and bolts of this thing, and let's talk about this coverage a little bit, because I think that that's, I tweeted out yesterday a stat on Taryn Johnson that, obviously got everybody talking quite a bit, because, I think that he's somebody that a lot of people have been frustrated with, coverage as a whole. I mean, I think without Tre'davious White back there last week, there was obviously some disappointment with the way that secondary played. The stat per Pro Football Focus, Taryn Johnson has given up 27 receptions, second most in the NFL through 5 weeks, 306 yards, fourth in the NFL, on 160 coverage snaps. Now, by comparison, the league leader in snaps this year is 255. And then an additional stat that I tweeted out, no slot corner in the NFL has given up more yardage while in the slot than Taryn Johnson, who's allowed 285 yards on 25 receptions. He's been targeted 32 times. The Bills might be looking to make a change here, and maybe not a permanent change, but maybe letting Taryn Johnson maybe come off the field a little bit more, if not replacing him completely, maybe splicing up the timeshare there, allowing a guy like Cam Lewis, if Tre'davious White's back in the mix this week. Cam Lewis played really, really well, considering the circumstances of him getting thrown into the lineup last week. Maybe you let him work in the slot a little bit this week and see if that makes any difference.
Yeah, you mentioned two names yesterday. You mentioned Cam Lewis getting the opportunity. You mentioned you were surprised we haven't seen more from Siran Neal this year, too, on defense. I think it's time to give one of those two a look. Change your looks. Change what you're doing in that on the back end, because Taryn Johnson has made some really good plays in run defense. He's that guy that'll come right up there at the line, sacrifice his body, and go one-on-one. But he's also been turned around in coverage, and he was the one that was in coverage on 3rd and 19 where they gave up 20 and he was turned around. It's been a really, really bad performance to date for Taryn Johnson. He has really struggled. It's not been the player that we saw, especially as a rookie. I thought he had a tremendous rookie year, pretty decent year too, but he's going in the wrong direction at this point. So you're right. Get him off the field a little bit more. Get some guys in there. If Trey White is back, you can put Cam Lewis in the slot. He has that versatility, which we know the Bills love, versatility players that can play inside, outside. Get him in there. See what he can do. It can't be any worse than what we've seen from Taryn Johnson at times in coverage.
Here's something too, Ryan. I found the stat last night, and it'll be in the preview story that goes up on the Syracuse.com, NewYorkUpstate.com later today. The Bills are 25th in the NFL this season when it comes to percentage of drives that end in a score. So right now, in their first 5 games, opponents' drives are ending in a score 48% of the time. That's just too much. I mean, if you look up and down this defense and some of the numbers that I think Bills fans aren't used to under Sean McDermott. In scoring defense, they're 21st at 28.4 points per game. In total defense, they're 17th at 371.8 yards per game. Pass defense, 263 yards a game, 24th in the league. And then run defense is where they've been the best. Outside of Darrell Henderson, they're 12th in the league at 108 yards per game. I think that's still going to, obviously Patrick Mahomes in this defense or in this offense is so phenomenal through the air. But this is a kind of game where if maybe Sean McDermott does cook up something to slow down Mahomes, there's been a couple blueprints out there. I thought the Chargers played well against them. I thought the Patriots, and again last week, the Raiders. I think that's the type of situation where you could see maybe a Clyde Edwards-Helaire have an impact on this game.
Yeah, and not just Sean McDermott, but the weather factor. There's supposed to be a lot of rain in the forecast. It could get pretty sloppy out there on the field, and maybe it does turn into a game where it comes down to the running a game and the running attack. And if you consider all factors, the Bills having Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, Josh Allen, who has not factored much into the rushing offense since week 1, but I think that could be part of the game plan. Isaiah McKenzie. You have those guys, and you compare it to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, talented back. And then, they have Darrell Williams, I believe, right now serving as their number 2 until Le'Veon Bell can get into this lineup, which was not this Monday, which would be the following game for them. I kind of like that for the Bills if weather plays a factor. So, and going back to what you said about how the Bills are 12th in run defense. Well, they did very well against Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry. I don't want to take anything away from them, but I also think opposing teams are saying, man, we can pass all over these guys. We're passing over the middle of the field. So maybe that's also part of the opposing game plans is we don't need to run as much. So it will be interesting if the Bills can fix the run defense to a certain extent, how they fare in run defense and find that happy balance, so to speak.
Couple more storylines until we move on here. Mitch Morse versus his old team. And, I think it was Patrick Mahomes this week. He was talking to the Kansas City media, and he had given his impressions of Josh Allen. And that's such an interesting dynamic in this game is that Mitch Morse is kind of this weird conduit between Mahomes and Josh Allen. He was a big reason Mahomes credited Mitch Morse for a lot of his early development. And, Mahomes talked pretty glowingly about Allen this week, respects his game, has enjoyed watching him play. And from everything that he, hears from from people that are here, Mitch Morse probably, Josh Allen works his tail off and he's excited for this matchup. He even mentioned this could be a matchup that, that plays out over the course of my career with both guys being in the AFC.
Yeah. If Josh Allen continues on this trajectory and we know what Patrick Mahomes is, this could be one of those quarterback battles that we see for the next 10, 15 years. Mitch Morse specifically obviously knows a lot about Patrick Mahomes and his game. Maybe that's something that would factored into the game plan this week in terms of what happened when he was there in his rookie year. But Morse as a player, I just really want to point out that this year he's been phenomenal. Last year, he dealt with a concussion in training camp. I think it kind of threw off a little bit of that chemistry last year with him and Allen, but also on the offensive line. He has been unbelievable in year two. Worth every penny. You know why the Bills would go out and get a guy like this. So kudos to Mitch Morse and how he has played through the first 5 games of the season. I think he definitely deserves a lot of credit for Allen's play, especially in terms of pass protection. It feels like the Bills have done a really good job this year on certain plays where Allen is just back there all day, being able to stand in the pocket, see what gets, who can get open, and then even wait for plays to develop. So, Morse going against his former team, that might give him a little extra incentive. Not that he left on bad terms by any means, but, I think sometimes players kind of get up for those games and kind of say, I want to prove that I made the right choice leaving that team and joining this other one, that being Buffalo.
Yeah, if you're watching the show, we are so grateful for our live viewers and also, whoever's listening on audio platforms. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. That always helps us out a whole bit. I'm seeing some questions in here already. We got some on Twitter as well. We're going to do a big Q&A in the second half of this thing. But another storyline I want to talk about before we move on to some other topics. Sean McDermott versus Andy Reid. The second time now that the mentor has faced the mentee, and in this case, Sean McDermott won the first one back in 2017 when both of these teams were in completely different places. I mean, you talk about the difference between Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes, and in a lot of ways, Tyrod Taylor to Josh Allen. It's very similar in the way that these offenses have now the explosion for the Chiefs was much quicker. Patrick Mahomes became an MVP candidate right off the bat. It's taken Josh Allen some time, but who do you give the coaching advantage to in this game? Because, I think Andy, who's, kind of more known for offense, I'm wondering if Sean doesn't have a little bit of an advantage in this matchup because he's so familiar with what Andy did for years on the offensive side of the ball. It might be able to kind of cook something up a little bit better to combat that.
If you would have asked me this last year, 2 years ago, I probably would have said Sean McDermott, but what we've seen from the defense so far, I'm going to give the advantage to Andy Reid. That offense is playing very well. Micah Hyde said it best. It's like a track team out there. They have so much speed. Even with Sammy Watkins out for this game, there's a lot of weapons between your running backs, wide receivers, tight ends for this team. And what we've seen from the offense so far, I think that Sean McDermott's going to have something cooked up to try to slow down this Chiefs offense. But at the end of the day, I just think there's so many talented weapons for KC that Buffalo is going to really have its hands full on Sunday or Monday.
Monday, yep. Tuesday we've had a game, so yeah, it's we're all over the place here. Let's move on a little bit and talk about this Bills defensive line. And This to me is where the game could be won or lost. Obviously, you need to apply pressure and the right kind of pressure against Patrick Mahomes to limit his big playability. We heard from Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. They spoke about this topic pretty long in both of their media availability this week. What you have to do to be successful against them. Micah joked around, said, I got to be able to be, 60 yards down the field sometimes. And even then, sometimes he can beat you deep if you're not careful. So another thing that Jordan said was it's great playing against Patrick Mahomes. It's a big game. It's a big moment. It's everybody's watching. The competitive juices are flowing. But it's a different game because you can play the route, the original play, fine. And then like Josh Allen, in a lot of ways, he can evade the pocket. He can make a different play down the field. His receivers are so good. Travis Kelsey, Tyreek Hill, McCole Hardman. We'll get a little bit more of him this week with Sammy Watkins out. They're so good in that secondary part of the play when it breaks down that's where defenses sometimes get caught for big plays. And that's an area of the field that, we're used to with Josh Allen and watching this Bills offense perform, but that's an area that they're going to have to be really clean in the secondary.
Yeah, really clean in the secondary. You mentioned the defensive line. Defensive line has not been good enough, simply put. They've invested a lot of money over the last few years in this defensive line. You have Trent Murphy, who, really good in terms of holding the edge, but hasn't really seen enough in terms of the pressure. Mario Addison had some strong play early in the year. Haven't seen enough out of him. Jerry Hughes, Ed Oliver. I do think we're starting to see a little bit from Quentin Jefferson the last few weeks. I want to see more from Vernon Butler. Bottom line is the Bills have sent a lot of extra pressure this year, and it has not panned out. They need to get that pressure just from that front four in a game like this against the Chiefs because, like you said, Mahomes can extend plays. He can really hurt you. So you want that front four to be able to generate a pass rush. They have to play together as a unit. Just like we heard about all 11 have to play team defense. That front four needs to play team defense so that way each of them can play off one another and maybe find a potential mismatch on that offensive line of the Chiefs.
The Bills have blitzed 84 times this year, Ryan. Like, what a change up from these last few years in how Leslie Frazier's defense has tried to win. They're really sending pressure at a much higher rate. And what we've seen so far through 5 weeks, with the 5 Chiefs games, the teams that have blitzed the heaviest, mainly 40 times, the Baltimore Ravens, Patrick Mahomes just carved them up. 34 points against them. I believe it was double digits blitzes against the Houston Texans. Same thing, 34 points, 7 touchdowns in those 2 games. The Chargers, they, decided to play back, allow their front four to try to generate the pressure. And even if, and I think it comes back to, I know a lot of fans don't want to hear it. It's not even just about the sack, but it's about making the quarterback uncomfortable, making the pressures work to where you're affecting the quarterback in making decisions. And so I think that'll be the one interesting thing is I think it was it might've been the Raiders or the Chargers, but I was reading something about how they played 3 safeties a good chunk of the game. And that's something that the Bills rarely do in their scheme. They don't really send out a third, deep safety to kind of protect against some of that deep stuff. Obviously I think Matt Milano getting back in the mix here is so massive, not only because of, we mentioned the Taryn Johnson struggles, but Matt Milano is a guy that you've really relied upon to defend really good tight ends over the course of his career.
Yeah, Milano being back would be huge. Travis Kelsey coming into town, having Trey White back there would be huge for this defense. But it's funny, they do have the personnel. If they want to run a 3 safety look tomorrow, they could do it. They have the talent, but you're right. It might just be a comfort level. It might be, we really haven't done this much. It's not something that's our specialty, which could lead to miscommunications. And if you have any miscommunications against the Chiefs, it's going to lead to some big plays. I can honestly say that I've watched a lot of the Chiefs games this year. For every brilliant play that Patrick Mahomes has made, he's also made some a few dangerous throws mixed in there too. Some passes, just like Josh Allen, that could be intercepted. So I think the Bills are going to have a few opportunities on Monday to create turnovers. It's just up to them to be in the right spot when Mahomes tries to use his arm strength a little bit too much, like we've seen out of Allen in his career as well.
We got all your questions. We got a couple more segments here of the preview show, and then we're going to get into all those. And also, comment in here too. Like, when do you guys like the live show? We're doing this at 12 because of a Monday game. We've kind of been playing with the time frame of these preview shows, but we want to make sure that it works for you guys because, obviously audio listeners can get it at any time once we upload the episode. But for you guys, we want to know what's the best time where we can get you guys all together and we can get the conversation moving along. So let us know in the comments. We always check those as well. Great questions coming in. We're going to hit those at the end of the show. Let's talk a little bit about Josh Allen here before we move on. Yeah, Saturday night I see is the first one. Yeah, we usually are going to start doing, I want to do more night ones, especially right now. This is kind of a tough, I know everybody's getting ready for football right now, and this is kind of a tough time, but I thought it might be cool right before the 1 o'clock games with no Bills today to talk in the afternoon. So we'll definitely, we'll put some more thought into that as well. I also got a contest cooking. I'll talk about that at the end, so stick around for that. Josh Allen in this game. The pressure is going to be on Josh Allen coming off of a game where after the start that he had, even though the numbers and like you mentioned, the watch back doesn't really, he made a couple bad throws. The second interception was bad, but I don't think that he played necessarily badly. I thought it was just an okay game. He didn't do anything outstanding, but I think the pressure is going to be on in this game because now we've seen a big sample size where this defense has struggled. It's not the same defense that it was a year ago at this stage going in this game. That could change. So I think more is on the shoulders of Josh. And we've seen in the past that's when he's tended to get into some trouble, is when he feels the weight of things on his shoulders and the need to make plays. And he kind of goes out there and tries to do too much. And I think that this is a different defensive line this year for the Chiefs. I still think Chris Jones is outstanding, and he could single-handedly change, the course of a game with the way that he pressures. But I think that this is a defense that you can make plays against, and this should be a game where Josh Allen, of course, takes what the defense gives him, but should be able to go out there and make some plays.
Yeah, I think he was pressing on Monday night against or Tuesday night. I'm still getting the days wrong. Against the Titans, he threw a few balls into triple coverage against when Stephon Diggs was out there. I think he was missing John Brown, and he was getting just impatient with the fact that the Titans were giving the underneath stuff, but they were playing the intermediate deep throws really well, and that's what led to that second interception, that really bad interception. Which I get that. The Bills were playing from behind. It's the first time they were playing from that far behind this year. He was trying to make up that point differential by stretching the field, and it wasn't there. Like you said, this is a completely different defense for the Chiefs. I think those big plays are going to be there on Monday, where we didn't really get to see those against the Titans. So that's something. Having John Brown back is really going to test this Chiefs secondary. So there's going to be more matchups for the Bills to win there, whether it's Brown, whether it's Diggs, Beasley, Gabriel Davis, maybe Tyler Kroft having another opportunity here with Dawson Knox being ruled out, and then even getting some of your running backs utilized in this passing game as well.
I want to see him run the ball a little bit this game, especially if the weather comes into play. There could be some rain tomorrow. It could get really nasty out there where the run game is going to be a little bit more effective maybe over the course of the game. Maybe get him out in space and maybe let him make some plays. I think that, as good as he's been as a passer, I still think there's part of his psyche that if he can make a couple plays with his feet, I think that kind of coincides too sometimes with getting him his whole game going. And so if things are slow, now he's come out in 4 games and looked absolutely spectacular as a passer. If that's the route that they're going to go and that's going to work, stick with what's working. But I do think that if you can get him going in the passing game, make the defense have to play both, set that tone early on in the game. I think that could be a nice little thing to watch as well. All right, we're 25 minutes in. We're going to go right up until maybe right before 1 o'clock. But before we continue, we're going to get to some key matchups, players to watch, our prediction, and then the Q&A. Before we do, a word from our sponsor.
Ready for football? Tops is with ready-to-serve fan favorites everyone will cheer for. Delicious family or party packs like pizza, sliders, fried chicken, barbecue, or beef on weck. Starting at only $4 per serving. Perfect for game day and any day. Only at Tops.
All right, let's look at a couple of these matchups in this game because there's some fun ones. I mean, obviously you got the two quarterbacks, and we could dive in even more into both of those things. But I think some of the weapons that they have are at their disposal are interesting. And you mentioned John Brown. He practiced on Friday, was limited on Saturday. I think he's trending in the right direction, and I know probably a lot of people are tuning in to kind of get some injury updates. I really think that all four of the players that people have been asking about all week, Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano, John Brown, and tre'davious White. I think all four of them have a really good chance to play on Monday. I almost did it. But the matchup that you sent over to me, Charvarius Ward, the cornerback, second cornerback for the Chiefs against John Brown in this game. Explain why you think this is a big one.
Yeah, I think it's a huge matchup. Ward's coming off of a really poor performance against the Raiders. He was torched by Henry Ruggs III, despite having great speed himself. He had great speed at the combine or at his pro day. John Brown, though, has great speed, and maybe he doesn't have Henry Ruggs-like speed, but he's a much better route runner than Ruggs at this point in Ruggs' career, in my opinion. So I really think that John Brown can win early and often against Charvarius Ward, and that is why I think that's such a big matchup for the Bills, because the Chiefs are going to give a lot of attention to Stephon Diggs. They know what Cole Beasley can do underneath. The tight end game, who knows with Tyler Kroft. So they're going to try to take out the number one receiver in Diggs. So that's going to open up some opportunities for John Brown. And in that matchup, based on what we saw last week with Ward versus Ruggs, I think Brown could end up winning quite a few of those one-on-one battles.
Here is my premium matchup to watch in this game. And I think it's going to be the deciding factor in this game because Jerry Hughes, I know the sack numbers aren't there, but if you check out some of the advanced stats, he is getting pressure. He is winning a lot of his one-on-one matchups. The guy that I think a lot of people were depending on this year to win inside was Ed Oliver. And he came out of the gate, all right, 3 pressures in the first game. In 4 games since, he's had only 3 more pressures and none in the last 2 games. That is not good enough. Now, we talked to Leslie Frazier this week. He's been dealing with a knee injury. He wore a brace all the way up until this last game. It's off now. It looks like he's feeling a little bit better. This is a game where there's a matchup to take advantage of. They're on their 3rd idea at left guard, the Kansas City Chiefs. They started off with 2 guys that opted out. They aren't even playing. Then they had Kelechi Osemele. He tears tendons in both of his knees last week. He is out now. So now they're going to Mike Remmers, who's a swing tackle that they're asking, hey, come on inside to guard, do what you can. I think that Ed Oliver should be able to exploit that matchup and win. And that's a big part of what we talked about earlier. If you're winning some of these one-on-one matchups on the defensive line, it allows Leslie Frazier not to have to send pressure from other means. Matt Milano is a great blitzer, but you're going to want him more in coverage because you got so many guys that can make plays. Tyreek Hill lines up in the slot quite a bit. McCole Hardman, who's going to be playing for Sammy Watkins, who is another speed demon. He can make plays once the ball's in his hands. Travis Kelsey. That's our 3rd matchup to watch here. Travis Kelsey versus Matt Milano.
Yeah, Milano, we've seen when he has not been in the lineup what this defense looks like. And not just so much in terms of coverage on these linebackers, but just the middle of the field and how quarterbacks are exploiting that and throwing with great success. So you get him back in there. One, I think that takes away a little bit of the middle of the field just in general. But if you can have Milano, your best cover linebacker, try to go one-on-one with Kelsey, and there's going to be matchups that Kelsey wins. He's a premier tight end. He's one of the best in the league. But if he can limit his production, that will be huge for this Bills defense because that is one of, if not the number one safety blanket for Patrick Mahomes. And if you can get him frustrated early, jam him early at the line, stay with him, get your hand in there on some passes and break up a few plays here and there, it can lead to some early frustration, and it can lead to this defense getting off the field and forcing some punts, something we have not seen enough this year.
With how passionate Lorenzo Alexander came out this week to defend Tremaine Edmonds, listen, he's a guy I'm always going to listen to. I might have a take. I'm usually going to listen to him. And I know some people said, well, he's his teammate and he's not going to talk badly about Tremaine Edmonds, but he's watching the film. I mean, he's not going to lie about it. If he thinks Tremaine Edmonds, played a pretty good game last week, then I'm going to take his word for it. And one of the things I in some deeper thought about it, I do think that the fact that both of these guys have been in and out of the lineup dealing with their own little injury problems this year has impacted both of their plays. And I think if you can now get them back together, I think that bodes well for both of them because I think that they're now in their third year playing together. The familiarity is so important there, and they play off each other so well because of their skill sets. Lorenzo said something interesting. He's like, they're interchangeable parts in a lot of ways. Like, I know that, Tremaine plays the middle and, Matt Milano's on the weak side, but they really do a lot of the same things. They're so fast sideline to sideline. Their reaction time traditionally has been really good. So I think if you get Matt Milano back, that could mean big things for Tremaine Edmonds. And that really goes into that matchup against Travis Kelsey. I think you're going to need both of those guys to kind of limit some of his big plays.
Yeah, you'll definitely need both of them to slow down Kelsey and some of these other weapons that the Chiefs have. One more thing on Lorenzo Alexander. Not only is he not just saying this because they're teammates, if he didn't believe this, he didn't have to comment on Twitter. He could have just ignored any comments out there about Edmonds' play. He watched the tape. He saw that Edmonds played a strong game, and he wanted to come out and defend him. So young player, having Milano back, though, is huge, I think, for both of them, because like you said, the communication aspect, the fact that they do many of the same things so well with one another.
All right, players to watch. Let's get into that right now. Who did you pick?
I picked Devin Singletary, and I think some people misunderstood in my Things to Watch article that I published yesterday that I was bashing Singletary's play this year, which couldn't be further from the truth. I simply said that after the Bills showed interest in Le'Veon Bell and legitimate interest, they were in the final three for his services. I just think that might cause Singletary to play with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder and say, he said all the right things this week. He said, yeah, he's a veteran. He could help me out. I could learn from him. He'd help this offense. But maybe in the back of his mind, he's saying, is that a shot at me? Am I not playing well enough in their opinion that they need to go out and look at this veteran back that has not looked like the same player that was an all-pro in Pittsburgh for the last few years? So I just think it might give him that little extra motivation in a primetime game to come out and say, look, I'm at the top of the league in terms of missed tackles. Create a lane for me and watch what I can do. I can make guys miss. I can pick up yards on the ground. I can pick up yards through the air. So my eyes are going to be on Devin Singletary in this matchup, especially if weather plays a factor. Does he play a big role in this for this offense and maybe pulling off an upset?
I like that pick, and I think that to your point, it looks like he shared a little sleepy emoji on his Instagram. So I think that maybe he is feeling, a little pressure, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. All these guys talk about competition and being motivated, and I think this is something that can motivate him. At the same time, I do think that Devin is such an interesting dynamic. Like, I think traditionally in the league, like, you get a high round running back, and, going back 10, 15, 20 years ago, that's the guy, right? Now it's a different league in that you almost want to create a two-headed monster in your backfield because of how physical the game is, injuries, all the kind of thing, different skill sets. I think that Devin, it's got to be a weird headspace to go out there and lead the league in yards per carry last year and then have the Bills go out and draft a running back in the same round you were drafted the year before. It's almost like you wonder, sit back after like maybe a little bit of a slow start and wonder how much does that play a part in maybe his confidence level. And so to your point, I think he, maybe this wakes him up, gets him recharged. I think that this offensive line is tired of answering these questions. I felt like we got a sense of that from Mitch Morse, who's so great. I love talking to him every week, but you could tell it's like, all right, yeah, we got to get this ship righted a little bit.
Yeah, and he talked about some things that they did well last year, this being Mitch Morse, and maybe, this year they're doing something completely different in terms of zone blocking versus man blocking, outside versus inside. So whatever it is that the Bills decide to scheme up here against the Chiefs, they need execution. That's the one thing he said. We need to execute. They give us a game plan. It's our job to go out and execute, and they haven't executed well enough for Devin Singletary, for TJ Yeldon, for Zach Moss when Moss was in the lineup earlier this year. So now that we're 6 games in, this will be game number 6, we need to start seeing that execution. It wasn't a typical offseason. They've been tremendous in pass protection, but now you need to see more of that in terms of run blocking and opening up some lanes for the running backs so that way they can get past that first level and show what they can do against the linebackers and maybe even against the secondary of these opposing teams.
My player to watch is Mr. Tre'Davious White, because that's another thing that, to me, has just not been talked about enough. I mean, he is a huge piece that was missing in that Titans game. I wonder if Ryan Tannehill goes for 3 touchdowns and looks as good as he does if there's a side of the field he's looking to avoid because he doesn't want to mess with Tre'Davious White last week. So he's looked really good in practice this week. He participated in one-on-one drills. I tweeted out a couple of the videos, as I do every week when he goes up against Stephon Diggs in practice. I always think it's must-see TV for you guys. And so I think that getting him back just changes everybody's role, and I think takes a lot of pressure off of other guys. Josh Norman, Taryn Johnson, Cam Lewis if he ends up playing, Saran Neal if he ends up playing, whoever. And, Micah Hyde even said, like, when Trey's on the field, we know we have a bona fide star that can make plays. And that's a confidence booster as well. So getting whole as a defense, I think will help out a lot. I know that, they haven't played really well consistently at any point, but I thought that it's a shame that Milano and Tre'Davious White missed last week because I feel like they started to figure some things out against the Raiders in the second half. They started getting more pressure. They started getting some takeaways. Josh Norman had the big game in the second half as well. So I think getting them all back together, maybe they could start to build on those things, and they've had enough games now. And it's better that you play in the Chiefs in week 6 as opposed to week 1, 2, or 3, where there's more tape. There's more, what's been working for other teams. You can try to implement that a little bit more. All right. Prediction time and then Q&A. What do you got?
Yeah, I have it being a back and forth game. I think the Bills actually do hang with the Chiefs in this on Monday evening. Goes back and forth, but at the end of the day, I have the Chiefs edging out the Bills 31-28.
Buzzkill, Ryan. I actually was I was saying all week I'm picking the Chiefs. I think, we tend to take this into account, like this 1 week, and you like all the stuff that you're seeing coming out of Buffalo because we cover the team. And so I think you skew to picking them a lot. Or at least I found myself in my first 2 years on the beat doing that. And I had this pegged as a Chiefs win going into the season. But I think with the way last week went, even on a short week with 6 days to prepare, as opposed to the traditional or 5 days to prepare, I think that this is going to be a team that's rejuvenated by the guys that they get back. I think this is an offense that kind of took a detour last week and could come back this week with John Brown back in the mix, maybe a healthy Zach Moss, although I do think we could talk about this as well. I think TJ Yeldon might deserve an activation and maybe keep Zach Moss on the bench as a healthy scratch. But I like the Bills in this game to win, to really make plays on offense, and that to be the driving factor. I think it's going to be a shootout. 45-42 Bills. It's going to be a throwback to the Jim Kelly days when he was going up against Dan Marino. Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes. I got it being a high-scoring, high-octane game. All right. So let's get into this Q&A. We put out a couple questions. You've been curating these questions in our chat here. Thank you so much, my friend. So let's get into some of these. Let's start with Scott Blakely. Is there something about the Bills and primetime games that just doesn't mix? Ryan, why don't you take this one?
If you were to ask me that over the last 10 years, I would say, yeah, keep them off primetime. But no, look at last year. I know the Dallas Cowboys game wasn't technically primetime, but it was a national audience. It was Thanksgiving Day, and they pretty much, I don't want to say it was lopsided, but that game was well in hand against the Cowboys last year in front of that national audience. The Sunday night game last year against the Pittsburgh Steelers. It was against Duck Hodges. It was ugly. They had to win late in the game, but they still won. Patriots game, the second game, they hung with them. They truly should have won that game, if I'm being honest, but they lost at the end. So I thought last year they actually played very well in those primetime games, those national audience games, and they held them. I thought that you came out and you said, that was a pretty respectable performance. Titans game aside, I think there was a lot of uncertainty about whether it was going to get played. Maybe they over-prepared. They overthought things too much because when that regular week of preparation was over, then they're told, hey, this game's getting moved to Tuesday. Maybe they went back and they just overanalyzed things, overthought some things. They had the turnovers, the lack of field position, little fixable things. So I'm not ready to say that this is a bad mix for this team. Now, if they come out and get thumped on Monday, well, then maybe I'm saying, oh, gosh, they really need to rebound in that next primetime game, or else maybe there is something to that. Maybe there is something psychologically about playing in front of a national audience that this team is just struggling with. But right now, I think it's too early to say that, especially after what we saw last year out of this team.
I'll take this next question. Jim Tombolesi, shout out to, he's actually my wife's cousin, my man, Jimmy T, good at Jimmer. Thoughts if the Bills will look to make any moves by the trade deadline? If so, what positions? And I'm glad that he asked this because this is something I've been thinking about the last 24 hours because, I've seen a lot of, Evan Ingram with the Giants and Zach Ertz. I do think, addressing the tight end position, if a deal makes sense, if you're Brandon Beane, why not? Why not try to add more weapons for Josh Allen? Dawson Knox, listen, I have high hopes for him, and I still think that there's time this season to get things figured out, get integrated in the offense. But what we have seen so far is a player that just continues to struggle with drops. And for a team that as good as Josh Allen has been this year, he's been that good in spite of the league's top drop rate in the NFL. And that's not good enough. And Dawson Knox is a guy that's kind of contributing to that in a big way. And so, can you make a deal for an Evan Ingram? What would it cost? Would Brandon Beane be willing to give up a second round draft pick, coming off the heels of the big blockbuster that lost his first round pick in 2020? I always ask myself that question, but I don't think he'll shy away from a deal that he thinks can make sense. Evan Ingram could be a guy that comes in here and helps to mentor Dawson Knox that can eventually, build into maybe a really dynamic 1-2 combination. What do the Bills think about Tyler Kroft? He had a big game a couple weeks ago. So, and also Evan Ingram, Dawson Knox play together at Ole Miss. They're good friends. That could be something that makes sense. I'm not as in the as keenly in the camp of dealing for Ertz because you're going to have to pay him. You're going to have to give him a big deal. And I don't know. He's been really good in his career, but I just don't know if that's the kind of guy that you want to give a big tight end deal to. Especially with all the big contracts that are on the horizon. You're looking at Tremaine Edmonds, you're looking at Matt Milano, you're looking at Josh Allen, adding a lot of money at the tight end position when, there could be a couple tight ends in the draft next year. I think Evan Ingram makes a little bit more sense. I think you have a little bit more time to make that decision on a big contract. And I don't think he's done enough early on to put him in that kind of caliber of tight end. So what are your thoughts?
Real quick, you just said it. This tight end draft class coming up is pretty loaded. I think there could be a really good player that falls to Buffalo in round 1 if they want to go that direction. That's a whole nother topic. I would look at the cornerback position, and say what you want about Jason LaCanfora, but he put out an article about the Houston Texans possibly dealing guys at the deadline if they continue to lose. And one person he mentioned specifically in the article was a Bradley Roby. Now, do the Bills go?
Yeah, you know how much I love Bradley Roby.
You love Roby. That's exactly
what I thought. We were down in Houston, and I think Ryan looked at me in the hotel and was like, listen, dude, stop talking about Bradley Roby. Okay? I love that guy.
I'm trying to fall asleep here, Matt. Stop talking about Bradley Roby.
Yeah, we roomed together.
Yes, we did.
What do you got to say about that? It was a great time. Hey, that's how bonds are forged, Ryan.
That's right.
You get on the road, you share a hotel room with a guy, and that's how you become friends. And I feel like that really helped us bond. But go ahead.
Oh, 100%. But if you can get a Roby in this secondary, that's huge for this defense. And it doesn't even have to be a guy like Roby, who I think could end up being an expensive type player to acquire in terms of what you'd have to give. Find a guy that you think fits your scheme, fits your defense. Find someone that maybe has played in that secondary before or a similar secondary that you're familiar with, and bring them in if you have these further concerns because Levi Wallace was picked on and he's on the IR right now, but when he comes back, I think that he could be splitting reps with Josh Norman. Norman was beat a few times, so it could even be an outside corner. It could be an inside, someone to replace Taryn Johnson. Just go out there and look at some of these teams that are already starting to look toward next year and say, is there someone that fits this scheme that could help us immediately?
All right, let's go to Twitter. I asked for some questions as well, so let's go there. One asked about resting Tremaine Edmonds against the Chiefs. He's assuming that this is going to be a loss, I would imagine, and the Jets, so that he's good to go versus the Seahawks and the Pats. Maybe give some time to Tyrod Dotson. I never like that approach. You know what I mean? If a guy's healthy, if he's ready to play, and Leslie Frazier has been adamant about how important Tremaine Edmonds is to this defense and having him there for making the calls. And I think Tyrod Dotson, as good as he played against the Miami Dolphins, that still is a heavy lift for a second-year undrafted guy to ask him to do all those things. So I would say let's maybe hold off on keeping guys out of the lineup that are cleared to play and are healthy. I mean, he wasn't in a red jersey on Saturday, so I think that shoulder, he's getting healthier every day. Sean McDermott said it this week. So I think you want your best players on the field. And who's to say this is going to be a loss? I think the Bills should be able to compete with the Kansas City Chiefs in Buffalo, even without fans. And it looks like we're going to be without fans for the foreseeable future. I mean, I know that's disappointing to see and read and to look around the NFL, and I'm all for safety, but you look around the NFL and all these venues are having fans. I'm sure it's tough for Bills fans to continue to sit on their hands, but I think you want Tremaine Edmunds in the lineup. You want all your good players historically in the lineup. Let's go to another question here. Adjustments on offense. I think we both can talk about this one. Why don't you start, Ryan? Will Zach Moss be active? And what do you think Yeldon's role will be going forward? And maybe should he be active?
That's such a great question. I would actually lean toward keeping Yeldon. 2 plays over 20 yards against the Titans. The 22-yard touchdown pass to Yeldon in the back of the end zone. And yes, it was a garbage time run late in the game, but Yeldon also had that. Yeldon was the only one that produced with those big plays against the Titans. The biggest knock on him coming out in these last few years was, can he protect the football? So far, so good. Knock on wood if you're a Bills fan. But until you see that, he hasn't really done anything to get knocked out of this lineup. And I know that may not be fair to Zach Moss, but Moss, he wasn't running the ball especially well before he went out with this toe injury. So maybe it wouldn't hurt to keep riding the hot hand, so to speak. And that being Yeldon, who can contribute in the pass game, who can contribute, and then can he also protect the quarterback in terms of protection? Yeah, he's been in this league long enough that he can do that as well.
Don't let me tell you I told you so, but I told you so. Everybody was there giving me grief all off season. Who are we going to get as a backup running back? Who are the Bills going to get as a backup running back? I told you, TJ Yeldon's fine. He'll be fine. You put him out there in that role, and that's where I feel like he excels. I feel like that is his role in this league. Former second-round pick, can kind of do everything. They'll be fine. So I think it depends on what you want to do. What have you seen from Zach Moss the last couple of weeks as he's been practicing? Does he feel more comfortable? Is there going to be more definitiveness in the way that he hits the hole, with the way that he reads with the quickness at which he needs to read what his offensive line is doing in front of him? If you feel confident in there, yeah, get your 3rd-round draft pick out there. And I also like the idea that maybe with Dawson Knox out, maybe going to a 2 tight end active situation with maybe Croft and Gilliam, or Croft and Lee Smith. I think it will probably be Gilliam because he plays the special teams, and then go and bring in an additional running back. Have both TJ Yeldon and Zach Moss. Give Zach Moss some early action. If it's not working out, you have TJ Yeldon that you can turn to. So I like that. Let's see here. We got some more questions in the chat. Will the coaching staff have this team ready to play? I think you got to put it on the coaching staff a little bit last week for, like I said, the circumstances were tough, but for a coaching staff that preaches no excuses, you got to own a little bit. You got to wear a little bit of that. And the Bills weren't ready to play last week. And I think that looking ahead to this week, the lessons that can be learned from that, I do think they'll be more ready to play this week.
Yeah, I agree too. And you don't want to make excuses for this team, but there were a lot of factors that went into that Tuesday night game. You were missing key pieces, the uncertainty, just a lot of extra things that maybe you don't experience on a week-by-week basis as an NFL player. So I think you'll have them ready. I think a lot of the Bills players are going to be ticked off after that performance that they had against the Titans, and they want to come out and show that's not us. I know the defense has had its overall woes this year, but I think they have a lot to prove. And the one thing I'll say about this coaching staff is historically they have rebounded pretty well after these blowout losses, which we've actually seen quite a few of in this McDermott regime. First year, back-to-back blowout losses. Obviously, the Bills ended up making the playoffs that year. We've seen a few here and there scattered in, but the Bills don't ever show that kind of performance long-term. They bounce back, and I expect a similar type of performance here on Monday.
All right. Do we have another question here?
There was one more about John Feliciano. If John Feliciano is made active, whenever that may be, which player do you think is dropped?
Well, I don't think anybody will be dropped necessarily. I do think that the Bills will maybe slide like an Ike Bucker to be inactive, but I still think they're going to want to keep the same number of offensive linemen that they currently have. And in terms of being dropped from the starting lineup, that's such an interesting question, because I think they're going to want to get a look at what this thing looks like with John Feliciano in the lineup. But let's remember that this, coming back from a pec injury, it could be tough. And so they may want to bring him back slowly. We'll see how this thing transpires in practice. But I do think that, and I'm no offensive line expert analyst, but I do think John Feliciano probably gives you a little bit more than Brian Winters. We'll see if Brian Winters gets going, if they have a really good game this weekend or this Monday, and they do better in run blocking. I think Brian Winters, could do a lot for himself this Monday.
Yeah. He was coming out of camp. I think there were questions about whether he was even going to make this team, but I think he's played pretty well given the opportunity. When Feliciano comes back, I'm going to echo your sentiments. I think the Bills are going to want to get him out there, but they're going to have to see enough at practice before they throw him out there in the starting lineup, or even if it's a 50-50 split. When is he going to be made active? Who knows? If I were a betting man, I would predict by this Jets game, I think for the Jets game, but we'll see. There's the Bills have a timeline where they can activate him. If not, he stays on the IR. The fact that he's practicing is an encouraging sign. The Bills obviously liked him a lot last year, not just what he did on the field in terms of his blocking ability, but he kind of gave that extra spark to the lineman. He played with that nasty style of play. Brendan Bean said that he kind of has that same kind of persona as Josh Allen, which I think is the highest type of compliment you can give an offensive lineman. So when the time comes, yes, I think he will eventually get moved back to that starting right guard spot. Could be Butker that's inactive, or if they do end up, moving a lineman to the practice squad, maybe that's the one. Maybe he is the guy, whatever the case may be. But, let's just kind of wait that out and see when he is activated first.
Ryan Talbot bringing it as always. This was a really fun episode. I'm so thankful for all of you guys and gals who joined us for this hour. This is the Shout Buffalo Bills football podcast. If you're just rolling in, we're about to end things here, but you can rewind, replay. This will be available on other podcast networks ASAP, probably in the next 30 minutes. Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Podbean, TuneIn, you name it, it'll be there. And when you get there, please subscribe, give us a rating and a review. It really helps us out. We will be back live right after the game, Monday night, hopefully for all of you guys, talking about a Bills win on primetime. That was so fun in Dallas last year. I'd love to do that again. I'd love to cover that again, as opposed to, what we had to cover on Tuesday night. For Ryan Talbot, I am Matt Parrino. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you tomorrow night. Have a great Sunday, everybody. Enjoy all the games. Take care.
Ready for football? With every game a home game, Tops is ready for you with its TV a Day giveaway. For 6 weeks, every day you shop is a new chance to win a massive 70-inch 4K TV. Shop Tops for the best deals in town, in-store, or online to win.